My name is Melody Bennett. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how I showed up to a wedding uninvited, or so they claimed, and left as the only person in the room whose name they would never forget. It started like 100 other weekends. Quiet. My husband, Alan, had just finished making pancakes for our 6-year-old daughter, Millie. The house smelled like cinnamon and maple syrup. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Until the ivory envelope landed in our mailbox, glossy and pretentious, with a wax seal pressed into the back like we were living in Victorian England. Inside, an invitation to my younger sister's wedding. Eliza. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. The last time I saw her, she called me a parasite. I'd been living in the basement of our childhood home, working 2 jobs to stay afloat while studying online, and she would float past in her ballet flats, telling anyone who would listen that I was dragging the family down. So why now? Why this invitation? I turned it over in my hand. No personal note. No apology. Just elegant font and expensive cardstock. Alan came up behind me, reading the doubt on my face before I said a word. You don't have to go, he said gently. But if you want to, I'll be right beside you. That was the thing. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. But I did want answers. The wedding was scheduled for the first weekend of May at a beachside resort in Monterey. Classy. Over the top. The kind of place you rented by the hour, not the day, unless you had money to burn. Eliza always needed things to be grand. Her sweet 16 had a red carpet. Her college graduation featured a string quartet even though she didn't graduate with honors. Everything with her was a performance. I RSVP'd. Alan and I booked a room for the weekend. We brought Millie along because I didn't want to leave her behind, and besides, I needed a reminder of what love looked like in case things went south. They did. Fast. The day of the wedding, we arrived early. I wore a simple navy blue dress, nothing flashy. Alan looked as handsome as ever in a tailored gray suit, and Millie held his hand as we made our way up the stone steps toward the main hall. The breeze from the ocean carried the scent of sea salt and roses. It was a beautiful setting until we walked in. People turned to stare like they'd just seen a ghost. One woman whispered something behind her champagne flute, eyes wide. A man nudged his wife, and they both looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across white marble. I kept walking, chin up, hard hammering. Alan squeezed my hand in silent support. Millie looked around curiously, oblivious to the undercurrents. A server offered us drinks. Alan declined. I thanked the man and took a glass of water just to have something to do with my hands. And that's when I heard it. Who even invited her? She has some nerve showing up here. Didn't Eliza cut her off, like, forever ago? The words hit like tiny needles, sharp and fast. I didn't flinch. I'd learned how to keep my expression still, a skill I'd honed through years of being the family scapegoat. Then came the slap without the hand. A woman in a lavender bridesmaid dress stepped in front of me. Perfect posture, full makeup, teeth too white to be real. Her voice laced with sugar and arsenic. Oh wow. Melody. You look present. Present. Not beautiful. Not welcome. Not even good. Just present. Eliza didn't tell us you were coming, she continued, blinking like she was trying to calculate how much of a threat I might be. Must have been a last-minute add-on. She sent me an invitation, I replied calmly. It was addressed to my husband and me. The woman blinked again. Well, I'm sure it was just a formality. You know how these things go. Mistakes happen. Then she smiled. Not with kindness. But the kind of smile a predator shows a rabbit when it already knows the rabbit's cornered. I took Alan's arm and walked past her without another word. That should have been it. But a few minutes later, as I stepped outside to call Millie's babysitter, she had wandered into the lobby with Alan to explore. I felt a tap on my shoulder. Eliza wants to speak to you. Alone. I turned. It was the lavender dress woman again. This time, the venom was less hidden. She says if you don't leave quietly, she'll have security escort you out. This is her big day. Don't ruin it. Ruin it? I almost laughed. But I didn't. Because I saw what this was. A setup. A public display. Eliza had always loved having the last word. So I nodded. Tell her I'll find her myself. And I did. She was in the bridal suite. Surrounded by stylists and sycophants, veil perfectly pinned, mascara curled to within an inch of her corneas. She turned when she saw me, and for a second, I thought there might be a flicker of something. Regret? Softness? No. Just calculation. You shouldn't be here, she said flatly. This is my wedding, and you're not part of it. I was invited, I replied. I didn't invite you, she snapped. Mother must have sent that out of guilt. She'll regret it. I could feel all the eyes in the room watching us, the stylists pretending to work while clinging to every word. Eliza, I said quietly. Why are you still so angry? She stepped closer, voice a low hiss. Because you left me alone in that house with them. You ran. You got out. And somehow, you made it work. I blinked, surprised. That wasn't what I expected. I didn't leave you, I said. They kicked me out. You didn't fight hard enough to stay. Her words landed with the weight of years. Years of silence. Years of pain. I wanted to say something kind. Something that would make this right. But then I remembered the girl who once laughed when our father shoved me into the mud for speaking out of turn. And I stayed silent. That was when the door opened. A tall man in a black tuxedo stepped inside. Dark hair. Blue eyes. Sharp jaw. The groom. He looked at Eliza. Then he looked at me. And he froze. Melody? His voice cracked. I tilted my head. Yes? I didn't know you were that Melody, he said. I read your paper last year on post-ICU nutritional recovery. Dr. Bennett. You're the Dr. Bennett? Eliza's lips parted. He turned to her. Why didn't you tell me your sister was Dr. Melody Bennett? The silence that followed was so heavy it could have drowned in salt water. Eliza's face twisted in slow motion, as if her entire expression couldn't decide whether to deny, defend, or implode. I stood still, hands clasped in front of me, the calmest person in the room. It was an old survival instinct, not to disappear, but to control the room without raising a voice. Lucas, as the groom, took a tentative step forward, clearly bewildered. You're the one who founded NutriCore Medical Systems? I gave a small nod. Yes. I presented your data to the Harris Foundation last quarter. Your model is being adopted in 2 of our recovery centers. I had no idea. His voice faded. The entire room had gone still, save for Eliza, who looked like she'd swallowed fire. This is my wedding day, she hissed through clenched teeth, low enough so only I could hear. Don't you dare make this about you. I didn't, I replied coolly. You did when you dragged me into this room like a criminal. I was happy sitting in the corner, sipping flat water and minding my business. Lucas glanced between us. Eliza, why did you say she wasn't family? She's brilliant. I thought you said your sister dropped out of high school and ran away. There it was. The narrative she'd sold to everyone around her for years. A lie so deeply woven into her reality that unraveling it now felt like cutting the brakes on a moving car. She's not who you think, Eliza spat. She's manipulative. Always has been. She left when things got hard. When things got abusive, I corrected. Lucas's eyebrows shot up. Abusive? I turned to him, voice even, but firm. I don't know what Eliza has told you about our childhood, but the truth is, I wasn't the golden child. I was the help. And when I asked for more, they threw me out. Eliza laughed sharply, but it didn't sound real. Oh, please. You left in the middle of the night because you were a coward. You couldn't handle it. No, I said. I couldn't survive it. Lucas stepped forward, his gaze darting between us. Melody, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Eliza never mentioned? That's because I was never meant to exist beyond her shadow, I said. But some shadows learn to glow when the light's taken away. The stylists had stopped pretending. One woman, still holding a makeup brush, let it fall into the tray. Another leaned in to whisper to the woman beside her. The mood had shifted entirely. The bride had been unmasked, and the doctor she tried to erase had just stepped back into frame. I turned to leave. Wait, Lucas said. Please, would you stay? For the ceremony. Eliza's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. You want her here? After everything she just said? He hesitated, and for a second, I saw the internal war flash across his face, groom or man of integrity. He made his choice. Yes. I do. Eliza stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard it rattled the hinges. Back in the main hall, Alan was waiting with Millie in his lap, reading a book to her softly while ignoring the sideways glances from guests. When he saw me walking in alone, his eyes scanned mine quickly. I gave him the briefest nod. I was okay. Or close enough. The music began a few minutes later, the classical chords ushering the crowd to their feet. Eliza walked down the aisle like nothing had happened. Perfect posture, cold expression, a smile stretched so tight across her lips it looked painful. She didn't glance my way. Lucas did. Several times. He fumbled the vows once. And when the officiant asked if there were any objections, you could feel the air tense, like everyone was waiting to see if lightning would strike. No one spoke. And yet, everything had already been said. The reception was worse. Because by then, people knew. They had pulled out their phones, done their research. Googled Dr. Melody Bennett and found pages of results. Interviews. Journal articles. Conference keynotes. A TEDx talk. The whispers were no longer about what I was doing here, but about how Eliza had kept her own sister hidden for years. The black sheep, not because she failed, but because she outshone the entire flock. Then came the real storm. During dinner, Lucas's father, a stoic, commanding man with a tie worth more than my car, approached our table. Dr. Bennett, he said with a gracious nod. I'd like to talk to you about the nutrition consulting arm you're building. We're restructuring our rehab services, and your input could be critical. Eliza heard that. Loud and clear. Her head snapped around like a whip. And then she stood up, drink in hand, walked to the center of the floor, and banged the glass with her fork. Everyone fell silent. I'd like to make a toast, she said sweetly. Lucas looked visibly uneasy. To the people who show up uninvited, she began, staring at me, and act like they belong. To those who think a few articles and a title can erase a decade of shame. Melody, this one's for you. I felt Alan shift beside me, his jaw tightening. I stood. Actually, I said, if everyone's listening, may I offer a few words myself? Eliza's eyes widened. No, you may not. Lucas cleared his throat. Let her speak. And so I did. I stepped into the center of the floor. My hands were steady. My voice didn't shake. I came here today because I received an invitation with my name on it. I didn't expect applause or fanfare. I expected awkward stares and cold shoulders. What I didn't expect was to find out that my sister still lives in the same fragile glass castle she built from lies 13 years ago. Gasps rippled across the room. You know, I wasn't always a doctor. I was a girl who cleaned blood off my father's coat after his surgeries because he said, you might as well be useful. I was the girl who applied to 9 colleges and never heard back, because someone intercepted my mail. I was the girl who was told that education was a waste on a face like mine. I turned to Eliza. I built my life from the broken pieces you all left behind. And now? I have a daughter who will never doubt her worth. I have a husband who has never once told me to shrink. And I have a name you all tried to bury. My voice dropped to a whisper. But even seeds buried in the dark will grow if they're strong enough. I returned to my seat. The silence was suffocating. Then a single hand clapped. Lucas. Then his mother. Then half the room. Eliza stood there, frozen. Bride in a battlefield of truth. Her crown of vanity slipping inch by inch. She sat down without finishing her drink. And I, Melody Bennett, sat taller than I ever had in that family's presence. I didn't come to Eliza's wedding to start a war. But sometimes, the war finds you anyway. After the applause faded, after the room slowly resumed its unnatural rhythm of violins and waiters and small talk strained by tension, I felt the shift. The real shift. People who had never made eye contact with me at Bennett family events were now offering polite smiles. Nods of acknowledgement. An older gentleman in a navy suit leaned in and said, "That took courage, Dr. Bennett." Not Melody. Dr. Bennett. The title they once used to mock me, doctor of what, cleaning? Eliza once joked, now rang like a bell in a cathedral. Alan leaned over and whispered, "If this were a courtroom, you just closed the case." I smiled, but my stomach hadn't unclenched. Because I knew Eliza, and silence was not her final act. Sure enough, just after dessert was served, she made her move. Her voice pierced through the clatter of silverware. I suppose if we're sharing family truths, we should all be transparent, shouldn't we? The mic had been left on the podium from the best man's toast. Eliza walked toward it like a queen with a crown slipping sideways, desperate to control the narrative before it slipped completely from her grasp. I know Melody thinks she's the underdog who triumphed, the forgotten child who made good, she said with that performative smile. But let's not forget she's also the one who was kicked out of the house for causing problems. Stealing money. Lying about our parents. I froze. Not because I believed she'd succeed, but because I wasn't sure how low she'd go. She used to tell people we starved her, Eliza continued, eyes darting to the crowd like she was fishing for outrage. That she wasn't allowed to go to college. That she lived in a shed. It's quite the story. But it's just that. A story. Alan started to rise, but I stopped him with a hand on his arm. Because this time, she'd overplayed her hand. Lucas stepped forward. Calm. Measured. His voice filled the room, not with volume, but with authority. Eliza, stop. She turned, visibly startled. What are you doing? He shook his head, gently but firmly. This isn't bravery. It's desperation. She laughed awkwardly, I'm just setting the record straight. No, Lucas said. You're unraveling in real time. And it's painful to watch. A gasp. Somewhere in the room. Possibly from her mother, or mine. Then Lucas turned to the crowd. I want everyone to know something. I didn't just meet Melody today. Not really. But I've known of her. Her research. Her company. Her reputation. The impact she's had on our field. The way she speaks about healing, not just of the body, but of dignity. He looked at me, eyes steady. She's more than a guest. She's someone I admire. And Eliza, you tried to bury her to make yourself seem taller. But today proved she never needed your approval. Eliza stood there, shaking. Her hand slowly let go of the microphone, and it clanged against the stand. Lucas turned back to the guests. I apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. He walked off the stage. The music didn't resume. Because this wasn't just a social hiccup anymore. This was a collapse. Back at our table, Millie had dozed off in Alan's lap, her curls rising and falling with his slow breath. Alan handed her to me gently and whispered, "Let's go." I nodded. But before I could stand, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Lucas. "I know I have no right to ask this," he said quietly, "but can we talk? Just you and me?" Alan gave a subtle nod of approval. I followed Lucas toward the garden behind the hall, where fairy lights glowed like fireflies strung between palm trees. The sea was a dark line in the distance. "I'm not going to make excuses for her," Lucas began. "But I didn't know about any of it." "I believe you. She told me her sister ran away with some guy. Said you burned bridges and never looked back." I let out a bitter laugh. "She always was good with fiction." He shook his head. "Why didn't you speak up before?" "Because when you've been treated like silence is your only currency, you forget how to speak in your own defense. Until someone hands you the mic." Lucas nodded. "That someone was you." "No," I said. "It was Eliza. She handed it to me the moment she tried to humiliate me again in public." Some people never learn the power of giving their enemies a stage, because sometimes they end up hanging themselves with their own lies. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then Lucas sighed. "I can't go through with this." I didn't answer. It wasn't my place. She's not who I thought. And that's not her fault alone. It's mine. I saw the warning signs. I just ignored them because I thought, maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was the one being too cold. Too picky. He looked down, almost ashamed. I was about to marry someone who didn't even tell me she had a sister. And now I understand why. "Because you wouldn't have approved of what she did," I said. "No," Lucas replied. "Because if I'd known about you, I might have never chosen her at all." I didn't answer that either. Some truths are too heavy to carry on a wedding night. By the time we left the venue, the crowd had thinned. A few guests offered gentle nods as we passed. The ones who once stared like I didn't belong now looked away, ashamed. Eliza was nowhere to be seen. I heard later that she'd locked herself in the bridal suite, refusing to come out until her mother begged her through the door. Her tantrum had echoed down the hallway like a broken song. She insisted she was the victim. That I had ruined her day. That none of it was her fault. But no one believed her anymore. Because the truth doesn't need backup dancers. It stands alone, naked and undeniable. As Alan drove us back toward our hotel, Millie curled up in the back seat with her arms around her stuffed giraffe. I watched the ocean pass by through the window and whispered, "It's over." Alan didn't need to ask what I meant. He just reached over and took my hand. "You didn't just survive them," he said. "You outgrew them." And for the first time in a very, very long time. I believed it. By the time we pulled into the hotel parking lot, the silence between Alan and me had grown tender. Not awkward, not heavy. Just full. Like the pause between verses of a song that still has more to say. Millie was fast asleep by then, her giraffe tucked under her chin, her lashes flickering with dreams. Alan carried her up to the suite while I moved like someone caught between two lives, the one I fought to escape and the one I quietly built. Once we got her settled, Alan poured me a glass of water and sat beside me on the small balcony, the sea breeze cooling the last of the adrenaline in my blood. "So," he said finally. "Do you feel like you won?" I stared out at the horizon, the waves slapping the shore like steady applause. No. Because it was never about winning. I just didn't want to disappear. Alan nodded. "Well, you didn't. You were undeniable." I gave a tired laugh. And now Eliza will spend the rest of her life blaming me for a wedding she ruined all on her own. Let her, Alan said simply. You're not in that house anymore. You're not 16, hiding in the shed because you spilled water on your dad's clipboard. You're Dr. Melody Bennett. You have nothing to prove. But that was the thing. Part of me still felt like that girl in the shed. Part of me still wanted someone in that family to say they were sorry, not because I needed it to move on, but because some wounds deserve to be named before they're released. And that wish was still burning low inside me when my phone buzzed the next morning. A text. Unknown number. Short. Rushed. Please call me. It's important. Lucas. Alan glanced over at my screen. You okay? I showed him the message. It's the groom. Or ex-groom. Alan nodded. Take it. I'll take Millie down for breakfast. He kissed my cheek, grabbed Millie's hand, and left without hesitation. That's the thing about a good partner, they don't hover when it's your storm to face. I called Lucas. He picked up on the first ring. Melody. I'm sorry to bother you so early. It's fine, I said cautiously. Is everything okay? No, he said, voice thick. Not really. I ended it last night. I said nothing. Let the silence cradle his words. She tried to spin everything. Said you planned this? That you showed up just to sabotage her. But I knew. I saw it in your face. That wasn't revenge. That was survival. He exhaled. I just wanted to tell you, thank you. You don't have to thank me, I said. You should have never been in that position to begin with. I know. But I needed the truth. And you gave it to me, even when it hurt. We were both quiet for a moment. Then he added, Melody. I don't know if this is too much to ask, but, can we meet? I want to ask you something in person. I hesitated. But something in his voice, earnest, broken, maybe even desperate, pushed me past my caution. Fine, I said. But not here. There's a cafe on Cannery Row, 10 minutes from the pier. I'll be there in an hour. When I arrived, Lucas was already waiting at a corner table, nursing what looked like his third coffee. His tie was gone. The top button of his shirt was undone. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. He stood when he saw me, as if he still believed in old-fashioned courtesy, and gestured to the seat across from him. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded. What did you want to ask? He took a deep breath. My firm is expanding into long-term care facilities. We're trying to overhaul patient care systems, and we need someone who understands medical nutrition, rehabilitation, and scalable implementation. Someone who isn't just theory, but field-tested. I blinked. You want to hire me? I want to partner with you, he said. I don't want you under anyone's thumb. You've done more with scraps than most people do with six-figure funding. I want your company to be the backbone of this initiative. I sat back, stunned. You're serious. Dead serious. I've seen what you've built. I did more research last night. You didn't just climb out of a bad situation, you built something extraordinary. And I want to help you scale it. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, I need to think about it. Of course, he replied. Take your time. No pressure. But I hope you'll consider it. I nodded. I will. As I stood to leave, he looked at me with something close to admiration. You changed everything yesterday. I didn't do it for you, I said. He smiled. I know. That's why it mattered. Back at the hotel, Alan and Millie were playing Go Fish on the floor. She beamed when she saw me. Mommy. I beat Daddy 3 times. I let her win, Alan said. No, you didn't, Millie corrected proudly. I kissed her forehead and sat beside them. I felt different. Not lighter. Not victorious. But like the weight I carried was no longer mine alone. Later that evening, we packed up and left Monterey behind. As the car rolled past the resort, I looked at the hall where the wedding had collapsed and felt no urge to turn back. I didn't even feel a trace of guilt. Because it hadn't been my fault. It had just finally been my turn. We returned to San Diego the next morning, and though the ocean looked the same and the air still held the soft scent of salt and asphalt, I was not the same woman who had left just days ago. I had gone to a wedding expecting passive-aggressive smiles and icy indifference. Instead, I walked out as someone impossible to ignore. Still, the high of vindication wore off quickly once normal life resumed. I folded Millie's laundry. I meal prepped for the week. I returned to my office and found 2 missed calls from potential clients and 1 email from a journalist asking if I was the Dr. Melody Bennett mentioned in a recent wedding scandal. I didn't reply. I didn't want the story to become tabloid fodder. It wasn't about humiliation or drama, it was about reclaiming something that had been stolen for years, my voice. A few days after we got back, Alan and I were having coffee at our kitchen counter when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and answered it. It was my mother. She looked older. Not just in the physical sense, though her once flawless skin showed stress cracks and her perfectly highlighted hair had grown out in streaks, but older in the way a person looks when time finally catches up with the lies they've carried. "May I come in?" she asked. Alan stood behind me. Silent, but solid. I paused, unsure whether to slam the door or swing it wide open. Instead, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Say what you came to say." She held a folder in her hands. "This is everything your father and I, everything we have left. Records. Medical files. The clinic. It's done. We lost our license 3 weeks ago, but we kept thinking we could fix it. We were wrong." I didn't speak. I just watched her squirm. "We need help," she said finally, voice cracking. "The bills are impossible. Your father, he's not well." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think I'm the one who'll save you?" She bristled at my tone but caught herself. "You're successful now. You have resources. We're not asking for much. Just some assistance. A loan." "A loan?" I said, my voice flat. "The way you gave me a loan when you threw my college acceptance letters in the trash?" Her lips tightened. I took the folder from her hands, opened it slowly, and looked at the numbers. They were drowning. Their clinic owed back taxes, malpractice penalties, and rent. Their names were blacklisted from every medical association in the county. One document even noted a patient complaint from years ago that had snowballed into a civil lawsuit. They were finished. And somehow, they still thought I owed them salvation. "You had a daughter," I said quietly, flipping through the documents. "A daughter who begged you to see her. Not fund her. Not spoil her. Just see her. And when you didn't, she left. She survived on scraps, sleeping in a tool shed and eating dollar store ramen. And she made it." My mother blinked. Hard. Once. Twice. I continued, "Now you're here, not to apologize, not to make amends, but to ask that daughter for a handout after pretending she didn't exist for 13 years? We gave you life," she snapped. "No," I corrected, locking eyes with her. "You gave me blood. Life, I gave myself." She swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw what looked like shame behind her perfectly painted lashes. "You should go," I said. "Before Millie wakes up and asks who the stranger at the door is." As she turned to leave, she stopped halfway down the path and whispered without turning around, "Do you hate me?" I didn't answer. Because hate implies emotion. And I had none left for her. Only memory. Only truth. Later that week, Lucas followed up on our cafe conversation. He sent a contract, generous, thorough, entirely in my favor. He wanted a 5-year partnership with NutriCore as the exclusive nutritional consulting firm for a new chain of rehabilitation facilities his law firm had acquired. I showed it to Alan, who scanned it and said, "They're smart to get in early. This thing is about to blow up." I signed the contract that same day. Overnight, NutriCore tripled in valuation. Within a month, I had to hire 5 new employees, 2 full-time RDs, and 1 grant writer. We went from catering to 30 facilities to negotiating a statewide contract with the Department of Public Health. And not a single person from my old life reached out to say congratulations. They couldn't. Because by now, they knew I had no intention of looking back. Then came the headline. A local paper ran a story: former prominent medical couple under investigation for insurance fraud and patient neglect. Photos of my parents filled the top third of the page. Their clinic signage had been removed. The article mentioned long-term negligence, forged medical documents, and falsified billing for procedures that never happened. And buried halfway through the article, my name. Not as a suspect. Not even as a source. Just one quiet line: their estranged daughter, Dr. Melody Bennett, currently operates a medical nutrition firm serving over 50 facilities in California. Just that. But it was enough. Because in that single sentence, I existed. Without shame. Without apology. I existed. The headline changed something. Not for me, my path had already split cleanly from theirs, but for the world around them. Suddenly, people who had once praised the Bennetts as paragons of suburban success began to distance themselves. Old family friends who never returned my calls were now writing polite emails pretending to check in. My parents' social circle, once ironclad, fractured like a porcelain plate dropped from 10 stories. I didn't respond to the emails. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the talking. Still, what I didn't expect was a call from Aunt Judith. "Melody, sweetheart. I saw the news, and her voice cracked. I should have said something years ago. I didn't know it had gotten so bad." "Judith," I said calmly, "you knew. You just didn't want to pick a side." She went silent. I let her stay there. Finally, she said, "You were always the strongest one." "No," I replied. "I was the quietest." "There's a difference." There were others after her. A cascade of calls and messages from cousins, former neighbors, even 2 of Eliza's old classmates who messaged me privately on LinkedIn. "She used to lie about you, you know. We thought you ran off because you were wild. I'm sorry we didn't know the truth." It didn't move me. It didn't anger me either. It just confirmed what I already knew. People don't want the truth. They want comfort. And my family had wrapped themselves in a blanket of deceit for years, threaded it together with status, stitched it with silence, and worn it like royalty. But fabric frays. Lies unravel. And the tear was now gaping. Eliza, however, didn't disappear. Not quietly, at least. One evening, just before closing a deal with a non-profit for elderly meal services, I received a message on Instagram of all places. No hello. No greeting. Just, "You think this makes you better than us?" I stared at it for a while. Then locked my phone. I didn't even block her. Let her watch. She was spiraling, and nothing fed that faster than being ignored. But the part of me that still remembered sharing juice boxes and bike rides with her, long before our mother started picking favorites, couldn't help but feel a whisper of sadness. What could she have been if our parents hadn't taught her that love was something to be earned by betrayal? 2 days later, the internet answered that question. A news segment aired: local woman faces fraud accusations in healthcare job scam. Eliza. On camera. Wearing a coat 2 sizes too big, sunglasses hiding tear-swollen eyes. She was accused of falsifying education credentials at a private clinic, securing a high-paying administrative job she wasn't qualified for, and using her fiancé's former contacts to apply for government grants. The footage of her being led away from the clinic in handcuffs played on loop. And then came the kicker. The email. A federal prosecutor reached out to me. A subpoena request. They had uncovered a thread of emails Eliza had sent to clinic supervisors, to grant offices, even one to Lucas referencing me by name. She had used my accomplishments, credentials, and research as part of her lies. She had cited my papers. Claimed I mentored her. Claimed I endorsed her role. I was a cornerstone in the false world she built. I was being asked to testify. I read the email 3 times, heart pounding. Alan walked into the room and froze when he saw my expression. What is it? I handed him the phone. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you're not obligated. No, I said. But I am responsible. For setting the record straight. He nodded. Then we'll do it together. The day of the hearing, I sat on the witness bench in a navy suit, my hair pulled back, my voice clear. I answered every question with precision. Yes, I was Dr. Melody Bennett. Yes, I had written those papers. No, I had never mentored my sister. No, I had never authorized her to use my name. Yes, I had been estranged from my family for over a decade. Yes, I had evidence to prove it. The courtroom was still. The judge scribbled notes. Eliza sat across from me, her eyes puffy, her mouth pressed into a permanent line. For the first time, she didn't speak over me. For the first time, she listened. After the hearing, I walked past her in the hallway. She stood still, like a statue. I slowed down, just for a second. I never wanted to destroy you, I said. Her eyes met mine. You did. No, I whispered. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. The case made headlines again. Local woman sentenced for healthcare fraud, false credentials. Eliza was given a suspended sentence, community service, and a ban from holding any administrative medical position for 10 years. She was fined. Publicly shamed. Professionally erased. Lucas filed a restraining order the following week and withdrew his name from every joint document they had started to build together. The wedding photos were wiped from the internet. Her Instagram went dark. Eliza Bennett, the golden child, vanished from the world she once dominated. Months later, Millie brought home a drawing from school. It was a picture of our family, me, Alan, her, and a little building with a heart over the door. What's this? I asked. It's Mommy's job, she said proudly. She helps people feel better. I stared at the drawing for a long time. Because that's what it really came down to. Not revenge. Not winning. Not even justice. But healing. Not just for myself, but for the daughter who would never have to walk the path I crawled through. 6 months had passed since Eliza's sentencing. The world had moved on. Headlines faded, social media turned its eye to new scandals, and the dust that had once clung to my family name began to settle into silence. But I hadn't forgotten. I didn't dwell on it, not like before. I didn't replay the nights in the shed, or the day my college letters were torn, or the years of shame carved into every conversation. No, those memories no longer controlled me. Now, they simply existed. Like old scars, not gone, but no longer tender. NutriCore was thriving. Our new statewide partnership allowed us to expand services to underserved communities, free nutrition education, custom meals for diabetic seniors, food literacy classes for single parents. Every time I walked into a community center and saw someone smile as they received a warm meal, I remembered who I used to be. The girl who was told, with your face, no one's hiring you. The girl who was told to stay quiet because speaking would only bring shame. And now? I stood in those same rooms, microphone in hand, offering guidance to women who thought they were invisible. And I saw it in their eyes, hope. One Friday afternoon, I returned to Harris Medical Center to deliver a keynote on nutrition equity in post-surgical recovery. The staff, the interns, even the new department heads, welcomed me like a colleague, not a guest. In the back of the room stood my mother-in-law, arms crossed, smiling. As the applause faded, she approached and handed me a water bottle. "You do realize you command more respect here than most surgeons, right?" I chuckled. "Don't tell Alan. He still thinks I'm the humble one." She laughed softly. "He brags about you every chance he gets." Then she paused, her smile thinning. "They came here again. 2 weeks ago." I didn't need to ask who she meant. "My parents. They sat in the lobby for hours. Claimed they just wanted to see you. They even brought flowers." I stared at the floor. "Did you speak to them?" "I did," she said firmly. "I told them the truth." "What truth?" She looked me dead in the eye. "That my daughter-in-law owes them nothing. That she rebuilt her life with no help from them, and that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation." A lump rose in my throat. I swallowed hard. She reached out and took my hand. "You are family now. And family protects its own." That night, I walked into Millie's room to find her sitting at her little desk, drawing again. "Is that another picture for your school project?" I asked. She nodded. "It's about who we admire." I leaned closer. "Who's that?" She held up the drawing. It was me. Standing in front of a group of people, holding a tray of food. Above my head, in her blocky handwriting, were the words, "My mommy is a doctor who cares." My throat tightened. I kissed the top of her head. Not for the first time, I wondered what kind of woman I might have been if I'd grown up in a house where someone said those words to me. But then I realized it didn't matter. Because I became her anyway. The old Bennett family clinic was finally sold. Someone converted it into a bookstore and tea cafe. Ivy crept along the faded bricks. The old metal sign was gone, replaced with hand-painted wood that read, "Second Chances." The irony wasn't lost on me. One Saturday, I took Millie there. She picked out a book on space travel. I picked up a copy of a nutrition science journal that once rejected my first paper. Now, they cited me. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, asked if I'd ever been there before. I smiled. "Once. A long time ago. Back when this place was different." She nodded, as if she understood more than she let on. Before we left, she pressed a small card into my hand. "This place is about stories," she said. "Yours belongs here, if ever you want to tell it." On the way home, Millie asked from the back seat, "Do you think people can really change?" I thought about that for a long moment. About Eliza. My parents. Even myself. "I think people can try," I said. "But real change? That only happens when you tell the truth." She nodded slowly. "Then I hope they try. The people you don't talk to anymore." I smiled at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Me too, baby. Me too." I haven't seen Eliza since the trial. I heard she moved north, lives in a shared apartment with 2 other women. Works part-time at a shipping company. No more fake clinics. No more speeches. No more lies, at least that I know of. As for my parents, the last I heard, they live off a modest pension in a gated complex in Temecula. No visitors. No clinic. No legacy. And I live. I breathe. I work. I love. I laugh. And I teach my daughter every day that her worth is never up for debate. Not by blood. Not by power. Not by anyone. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to the story they tried to bury. For letting my voice fill the silence I was raised in. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not cruelty or justice, but peace. Peace is louder than pain. And sometimes, silence is not weakness. It's the final word. Melody's story is a reminder that walking away from a toxic past isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You don't have to burn bridges. Sometimes, it's enough just to stop crossing them. And sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that last the longest. If this story moved you, or if you've ever fought to reclaim your own worth, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. And your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful, emotional stories like this one, where the truth always finds its way home.